Welcome to Analyst Around the Arch, the official CFA Society St. Louis podcast. My name is Alec Hubbard. I'm joined by my co-host, Brady Ritchie, and we have a special guest joining us today, Dr. Gaurango Banerjee. Dr. Gaurango is a professor of finance at the Plaster College of Business and Entrepreneurship at Lindenwood University. He's published research in over 20 peer-reviewed journals. Now, Brady, I know what you're going to ask me. How are we lucky enough to get such an educated individual on the podcast? Well, he is a CFA charter holder and St. Louis's University Relationship Committee chair. Doctor, happy to have you on.
Thank you, Alec. Thanks for the kind introduction. Yeah.
So, Doctor, if you just tell us a little bit about your background, and we know that you grew up in Eastern India, and eventually you made it your way to the United States, where you're a professor at Lindenwood. But tell us a little bit about growing up, and how did you become interested in finance and pursuing an education and a PhD there?
My first introduction to finance was actually through economics. So I did my undergraduate in a dual degree program in India in economics and in engineering. We had a dual degree program there. And I find the engineering was more of the application side and the economics was more on the theory side. So after that, when I came to the US, I actually followed up with a doctoral program in economics and a master's in finance. And then I thought that economics is great in terms of the theory behind it, but in terms of applying it, finance would be one way of So my engineering background helped me do the more analytic side of the economics. So that's how I got into finance. And then while I was working in University of Texas system there, I found out that I first did a master's in finance at my graduate program. And then while working at the University of Texas, I found out about the CFA program. And the curriculum itself was so applied and it was so applicable to the industry, I thought this might be a good way. I have a passion for teaching also. So I thought this would be a great way to connect students to an applied area in economics by doing my CFA myself and kind of doing a financial analyst program. So I completed the program while I was working there. And another interesting background, while doing my graduate program in economics, I did an internship in finance. And this was at a small brokerage firm there, actually, where I was doing my graduate program. And the funny thing was the head broker there, he had an investment game set up for us, like a stock simulation game, which we have here. This was actually a real-time game. And I still remember he provided like a $50 gift to the winner of that game for all the interns there. And that kind of drove me, and I won that game, and that kind of drove me to go for more of the finance, like a portfolio management oriented thing. And then after that, I was introduced to this idea about a CFA program. And I thought this would be just a perfect way of kind of trying to do my program and help out students also in the same way.
So I also work as an adjunct professor. Not at Lindenwood, but a couple of other universities in town.
Yes.
And so I've had the pleasure of teaching, pre and post COVID. Given your teaching experience, are there any trends that you see with students and just in academia, from, your career, or any trends that you could even identify?
Yeah, so right now it's interesting. Like one of the trends we are all seeing right now is the use of like AI in courses and so on. And one of the things, I was talking to some people in the industry also to see how I can incorporate that, because students are also using AI right now. Like the trend is that they're trying to apply that. And it's very useful for them to do that, to learn how to use it. And so we are trying to see how students can get more engaged in how, like, maintain their critical thinking skills, but still use AI as a tool. And so in some of the projects, in class projects, for example, I have students maybe use AI as a tool. For example, I'll give you an example. Like they do a project on a particular company and they're trying to analyze the earnings call for a company and get some information from that, right? So why do read through all that? Have AI give you the main points of the earnings call, and then using that, have the students and we make some conclusions about that and about the strategy of the company and so on. So that's one thing. And another thing is the in terms of the trends. I think the students are now trying to figure out that they need to update themselves on some data analytics as well, because that's another thing which is coming in. And so some of the students are trying to take additional courses, say in Python or something like that, just to kind of get a little bit of a better understanding of how to apply these. CFA is still going to be very useful because even if the AI provides the output, if there are people who have to have the expertise to analyze that output, right? So the students should have that critical thinking skill developed, that they can analyze what was in the earnings call and make their own judgments and so on. So CFA professionals are the ones who are providing the expert opinion, even if you get an AI output.
So they don't have a fear that they're not going to have a job opportunity because AI is going to replace them. They still see an
Right, they
opportunity.
still see, and they see that they I think they have a feeling that they should know how to use AI more importantly than fearing that AI is going to take away their jobs, right? So how they can apply that AI and how to use it in a job, I think that would be important for them. Yeah.
Do you think that there's students who would have went into a background in computer science, but because computer science is very technical and a lot of the output is objective, they're thinking now, hey, maybe I should get into a more judgment-based field so that I'm a little bit more insulated from the kinds of automation that AI can do, and then they pop into, Dr. Banerjee's Finance 101 or
Yeah, at least from my experience, like some of the students who come to finance, they're more looking at some of the application side. So I think they would be more interested in a finance career because they know that AI will provide the output, but there'll be jobs there. I mean, there'll be jobs for people who want to analyze that data. What do you think, Brittany?
Well, so in your other question about like people that take finance, so there's a course that I teach where they go through it in a cohort. So they don't really have a choice of if they take my class or not. They have to. But you certainly get a feeling of whether they want to be there or not. And most of them in this particular course are like they're engineers or have an engineering background. But I can definitely say that it's a master's level course, so we spend some time with valuation and talking about how a narrative and stories come together with numbers, and that's super troubling for an engineer. They're usually math people, and they're used to there being an answer for things, and then when you tell them that there are different ways to think about it, and given the different ways to think about it, that's going to drive a completely different kind of valuation. And we do like a Tesla is the back of the envelope, and is Tesla, a car company and, maybe being valued like Toyota, or is it a software company and it should be valued like a software company, which until 3 months ago, software companies received rich valuations, maybe not as much anymore. But yeah, it's interesting, of how they think. And I wanted to circle back to your background too, in that, I have some experience where I used to work at the St. Louis Fed, and economists, most of them had a undergraduate math degree, and then they got a PhD in economics. And one of the things I found fascinating is that for the most part, none of them had ever taken an accounting class or a finance class. And economics is really a social science. Um, so it's people a lot of times will put economics and finance into sort of a similar bucket. Um, but they're very, very different. And it's interesting that you had an engineering and economics, a very grueling, there is an answer to an economics soft science. And then you put finance on top of that. So it almost challenges the way that you think. Do you find yourself looking at things from a lot of different perspectives because of that?
Yeah, it does. Economics actually helps a lot in certain areas also. Like if you think about the behavioral side and the more of the critical thinking side, economics has a lot of foundations which does not have, sometimes you don't see direct applications of it, but those principles, economics principles, could be applied in finance, right? So those are some of the things which students can get benefits out of, is instead of just looking at the theoretical, the critical thinking does grow. That helps a lot in my thinking also, the critical thinking. But in terms of the analytic and the the quantitative sides, maybe more of the engineering helps, right? Or the and so using the more of the quantitative side and then applying the critical thinking side, I think both are required in finance.
Do you find yourself as a efficient? Do you find yourself as an efficient markets person?
I think efficient market might work for over a very long period of time. I think that temporal aspect is important, right? But if you're looking at a more of a shorter time frames or break it up into time brackets, I think efficient market could break down at some point, right?
I think that there's opportunities in most asset classes, where there's opportunities because regardless of the industry, you have the same sort of human behavior that exists, and the behavior is, I think, really what drives the inefficiencies in markets. There's one joke about a student and a professor, are walking down a path in campus, and the student says to the professor, as he looks down, he says, "Oh, well, isn't that a $20 bill?" And the professor says, "No, if it was a $20 bill, somebody would have picked it up."
There's the
That's
classic.
your efficient market
Classic.
hypothesis. So,
Yeah. There are a
that
number
happened
of them.
obviously at the University of Chicago.
Right, right, yeah, right. And you heard about the one where they're in an island and there's an economist and a chemist and a physicist, I think. And they're down to their last can of food. They're stranded there. So they're trying to see how they can open that can for their last can of food. So then the physicist says you have to hit it in the certain angle in a rock, and then the chemist said you can use a certain acid we can kind of use that to open it. And then the economist said, oh, just assume that you have a can opener. That's all you need. but and but one of the things about economics is a lot we say we have all the theory, we talk about the money and so on, but sometimes when we say that, but if you need to make the money, you have to study finance. So
Right,
yeah.
right. It's really interesting. Like from my experience, it's like the people that drove, fancy cars were in banking, and the economists drove Honda Accords and Toyota Camrys, and they were all about like the numbers and the models, but they weren't like capitalists. They weren't the people that were like trying to figure out how can I make money from this opportunity, or how can I profit from this happening. It's just it's a different way, it's a different thought process.
This is really interesting. So you guys find that the field of finance is less plagued by this bounded rationality problem that is kind of the straw man when you're picking at economics as a field.
Stanley Druckenmiller, an investor that I have a lot of respect for, he talked about going to the university to get a PhD. And I think he was in a PhD program in economics. And he said, when I learned that they were trying to take the economy and force it into an equation, he said, I just thought that was the dumbest thing I had ever heard. So, he dropped out of the program. Obviously, he's much better off for, having done so, but he was one of those people that was trying to figure out, well, so if I have this situation, how do I profit from that? How do I make money from that? As opposed to I'm going to write a paper about it. So yeah, usually there's almost sort of like a line drawn. I remember sitting in like a brown bag seminar at the Fed, and at the time Chris Waller was the director of research, and so he was in there. The presentation was on currency arbitrage, and I remember like one of the older economists was asking some questions about it, like this was something that was gonna like take place and last for maybe like days, weeks, or months. And someone had to explain to him that this is almost like just theoretical. Computer programs will figure this out in like less than a second, and the arbitrage will be gone. We write a paper about it, and we have a bunch of super smart people that gather in a room to talk about it and dissect the Greek letters and the math and everything else. But how much does it matter? It's interesting, nevertheless. But yeah, I mean, people in finance and people in economics are kind of, and the people that are really smart that kind of oftentimes get drawn into finance by people that want to figure out how to make money on something. A lot of times you end up with, some of these financial instruments that perhaps we all would have been better off if they wouldn't have been created in the first place.
Yeah. And I can add on that a little bit, but economics is kind of important in some ways because it's kind of the basis for a lot of business areas, like you build from economics, right? But the application side, I think, is not there that much in economics as it is in these fields like finance and other areas in business, right? So economics has kind of the tool, it provides the theory behind all of this. But if students want to apply it, they have to use these other areas. Yeah.
What class do students not take that you think that they should take?
Yeah. I think right now the way it is, students should take some data analytics classes, I have a feeling, just to kind of make them better prepared, other than the traditional finance classes. So that's one thing which is, I think, should be focused more on having students exposed to things like a little bit of Python or something like this, just to kind of get them ready for the market a little bit.
So a friend of mine, who's joining the board, the CFA board this year, mentioned this. So I won't mention his name because hopefully we can do a podcast with him. But he mentioned that the class that he didn't take that he wished that he should have was journalism, and that made complete sense to me. And his point was that we spend so much time focused on economics, accounting, finance, and so forth, that we discount the fact that what are we going to do with all that? And eventually, you're going to need to take that and write it up. You're going to need to write a report. You're going to need to write something, so journalism helps. And I would say that for example, I write a newsletter, and it's sometimes kind of painful for me because I just don't naturally like to do a lot of writing. And AI may help students with that in the future. And I will say that I had the pleasure of having lunch with Ed Yardeni when he was here in January for the forecasting dinner. And one of the takeaways that I got from that was I mentioned writing and how I kind of struggled with that to him. And he suggested that I use Grammarly. So apparently he's using Grammarly and he was kind of a big fan of it. And I've started using that as well. And it helps a lot. But, you know, if I do love to read, and when you do some reading, you can hear someone's voice in what they write. So computers are not really going to help you develop your own voice as a writer. So that would be something that kind of crosses over into the humanities from the business department. But yeah, that would be something that I would do over younger self.
Yeah. And really, just to follow up the same thing, I was just thinking about another class they would benefit from was like something in communications. Like sometimes students are losing that right now. That's one of the trends with the, right? So that is very important for students to have that communication skills. And that's one thing which Warren Buffett says a lot, right? That's one thing he looks into a lot into when he thinks of people graduating. So that's something which students should also kind of consider, taking a communications class, which would be useful.
So my degree was in econ, but the 3 years that I spent there, I did debate and I worked for communications professors. And I will say that did probably as much, if not more, for my career,
right,
as doing the more quantitative side of it. At least when I started my career, what got me into high net worth consulting was I got into Wells Fargo's trading center, and I took concepts about like adapting your speech to speech judges for competitive speaking, and I reworked it and I adapted it to finance, and I like coached people on that through Wells Fargo until they were like, well, let's get this guy in consulting. He's great. And then when I got there, I started using the math part a little bit more, because at that point I'm, working with business consultants with 20 plus years of experience. So it's like, okay, I'm glad I can communicate as well as you, but there's a little bit more of a plug-in on the quantitative end. But communication really is everything, especially in our field, because numbers can have different interpretations. And so you do have to be a little bit persuasive with this is not only how you should evaluate an investment, but why you should, why it's superior to the alternatives, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, makes sense.
Dr. Banerjee, any closing comments you want to leave our viewers with?
I would encourage like universities who haven't started the CFA affiliation program to look into it. And if they have any questions, they feel free to check back with me. If anyone has that, I would be happy to kind of help with that. And have students get more involved with the St. Louis CFA Society. I would like them to kind of give more networking with our society and so on to help them. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Analyst Around the Arch. If you're in the Eastern Missouri, Western Illinois region, we encourage you to come to a CFA Society event. On August 19th, from noon to 1 at the St. Louis Club in Clayton, Missouri, we'll be hosting an emerging market panel for lunch featuring Chad Cleaver from Dry House Capital Management and Akil Submarinian from Pazina Investment Management in order to take a deeper dive into the emerging market asset class in the wake of its recent performance. And on September 9th, for breakfast at the St. Louis Club, we'll be hearing from Chief Investment Strategist at Hightower Advisors, Stephanie Link, on her outlook on the economy. This is always a packed event, so be sure to RSVP. And no matter where you are, be sure to subscribe to CFA Society St. Louis's YouTube channel. Your support perpetuates our educational programming across the internet, and it's greatly appreciated.